It was not an easy process for you guys, right? To find something that you really like.
That's right. So the advice he gave us really helped us to begin to narrow down different spots. We did really take you on quite a journey, and I think it was life-saving that we had you along board. You know, if you're going to set up shop, if you really want to appreciate the fact that there is a great investment opportunity in Portugal, it's a great place to be, and it's a great place to vacation. All of those fit the bill for us there. So get the right people. Don't worry about being remote, and you'll find, you know, what you want here.
Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. I am Mia, together with my partner Rafael. We are the founders of Mall Portugal, a property advisory company that helps you buy property like a local. Today we have our client John sitting here with us in his beautiful home in Lisbon, and we will talk about his experience of purchasing a property in Portugal today with you. Hi John.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
So welcome back to Lisbon. I know you and your family are visiting Lisbon for I don't know how many times already this summer.
Yeah, I know we like to come quite often, almost once a year, and as often as we can afford to.
So how did you find us?
Yeah, we were doing a lot of researching, watching a lot of videos on YouTube, and you guys came up. Like, you were really informative. You guys definitely felt like you had a good feel for the market, and we just felt like we could connect with you. And sure enough, we reached out, and it was, you know, just a pleasure kind of beginning to connect with you guys and then talking about the market.
So today we're sitting in John's apartment, which we helped him and his wife to purchase a couple of months ago, right?
Yeah.
We're sitting in Santos neighborhood in Lisbon, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself. I think you can start with, you grew up in Canada, but you have Portuguese parents, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I'm Portuguese, but moved to Canada very young, and I've spent my entire life there. Did come back to Portugal quite often, visit family. I have quite a bit of family throughout Portugal, so do travel a lot here. And once I had a married and family of my own, you know, we would come back and the kids would really enjoy connecting with their cousins. And so we do visit Portugal quite frequently, and yeah, we tend to love it here.
And is that why you guys chose Portugal for your this is basically second home / investment / holiday home, right? I know your wife doesn't have Portuguese connection.
That's right.
So what makes you guys decide to choose Portugal as a destination to buy your second home?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I think the things about Portugal that most people talk about, and they are absolutely true. You know, we love the food, we love the weather, we love the wine. You know, but there are also other aspects about Portugal, the accessibility. It's very safe. And then, of course, you know, one thing that my wife did express to me is that, you know, she's traveled throughout Europe, and as someone who is of Chinese descent, I think she feels very comfortable in Portugal. She doesn't feel like, from the perspective of integrating with the culture, you know, people are very welcoming, people are very warm and friendly, and many people speak English. And it's very easy to just get along in Portugal and to make your way throughout the country. So, you know, those are obvious reasons why, you know, I've always liked to come here. My family has taken to it as well. Yeah. And, you know, from the personal perspective, you know, obviously we had the family ties, but as far as, you know, where we chose to vacation, where we may choose to retire in future, you know, Portugal fits the bill for those as well. And, you know, lastly, it's a great investment opportunity. So that's another piece of, you know, buying a property is a decision you should make, you know, if you feel that you're going to get the most out of it. And if we're only going to come here and vacation, you know, once every couple of years, you're better off just there being or something. But, you know, if you're going to set up shop, if you really want to appreciate the fact that there is a great investment opportunity in Portugal, it's a great place to be, and it's a great place to vacation. All of those fit the bill for us.
Well, sounds to me, the logic is very clear. But when it comes to real practice, there's always some conflict. For example, a lot of people, just like you guys, for example, you looked at much bigger properties that actually fit your family because you have 3 kids.
Yeah.
And where we're sitting now, it's 2-bedroom, which is a little bit crowded, right?
Yes.
So my point is there's no property that fit for every need, especially from the beginning. So what's your plan with this property now?
Yeah, I think part of what we wanted to understand is, can we have a home base that fits our family? Knowing that, at a time we may be spending a couple weeks here, a couple weeks there.
Yeah.
But also, do we have a property that when we're not currently using it, we can rent it out and be able to use it as an investment property that allows us to at least maintain the property for ourselves. So from that perspective, we find that even though it is a bit tight, it's in a great location. It's in, probably one of the most wonderful cities in the world. And, from a vacation perspective, it really allows us that base that, we can stay, we can cook, we can entertain. It's well laid out, despite the fact that it is a little on the smaller side. So we're very happy with it. And its a central location, I think, is probably some of the biggest win for us is really having a great spot.
And you guys really enjoy the neighborhood, right?
We do, yeah. It's a vibrant neighborhood. There are lots of great places to eat, great places to visit. So there are a number of different museums.
Yeah.
And, additionally, it's just off the beaten path enough that residential, somewhat quiet at night. But, within a few steps, you're into the bustle and really enjoying yourself in Lisbon.
So you guys are happy about this choice?
Yeah, very.
Okay, but just wanted to share a little bit. I don't know if you remember when we started working with you guys, the criteria has to be a good investment property. Location doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. We were given a certain budget. I think it was 350 or maximum 400,000. Yeah. But then, of course, the cheaper the better. Easy to maintain. Mm-hmm. And if it's a house, better to have a pool.
That's right.
And then I think we had quite a few calls trying to define the location, right? Before I came here, I saw on our CRM system that we went through between 50 to 60 listings. This is only registered in our board that we called. And then among them, I think we visited 6 or 7, and you guys also visited 2 or 3.
That's right.
The location was across the board, it was all over Portugal.
Yeah.
I think initially your wife wanted something to be in the Silver Coast.
Yes.
And then they traveled to Douro Valley, and then they went for Alentejo, different areas in Alentejo. And then I think it was we suggested in Lisbon, I don't remember, to take another approach instead of a house, maybe try apartment. So it was quite a fun process for us, because this is exactly what happens. First, of course, everyone's excited, but then as you go to dig through everything, and then I think your opinion also changed a little bit. It was not an easy process for you guys, right? To find something that you really like.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, we did really take you on quite a journey, and I think it was life-saving that we had you along board, because when we initially came, because we know Portugal so well. From our perspective, it's such an accessible country that you can get everywhere. Yeah. So our wish list was like, we'd live there, and we'd live there. And,
we can go there.
Algarve, no problem. Alentejo, oh, for sure. Silver Coast, yeah. So, part of narrowing that down, I think, was our journey, and I think a lot of the advice you guys gave us around, hey, it's great to get a house with a pool. But again, depending on where it is, the rentability might not be so good if part of the criteria was to ensure we could have it as an investment property when we're not in it. The maintenance would also become a little more difficult. Property management a bit more difficult if you're off the beaten track. So yeah, I think the advice you gave us really helped us to begin to narrow down different spots. And of course, anytime you have a couple, we may have different criteria. And part of it is I love the heat. My wife loves the coolness of the Silver Coast. And part of our journey visiting different locations really helped us narrow it down. But as we did go through the journey, we did go through a number of different offers. Those offers and that process really opened our eyes to the process of buying here, and a lot of the different things that you were able to offer, and advice, and getting us through different scenarios and situations.
I remember this house, it's in the first version of the shortlist. One of the house is in Grandola.
Yeah.
I think you guys found it first, and we were surprised with the price because it was such a short drive to the beach. So Raphael and I went to visit. The listing agent was there. The owner, I think owner was a couple, and the wife was there. So she opened the door. She really accommodated us, and when we want to see everything of the house, she said no problem. And I think that was the first house you guys really wanted to buy. And then during this process, there was something weird happening because she was all of a sudden become unavailable during negotiation. At one point she said she would sell, and then she said she would not sell, and then she wanted to change the agent, and the listing agent got really frustrated with her, and then was also constantly telling us like he doesn't know what's going on, and I believe him. And we also saw that listing going on and off website.
Yeah.
I remember we suggested we should just move on, but I think you guys really like the house. I totally understand. If I just moved to Portugal, I would have keep pursuing as well. But because I've been living here and I sort of understand there's something, it was not communicated. So later on we found out it was the husband didn't want to sell, or they have some issue with the bank, or everything combined. It just became very messy, the situation.
Yeah.
But I think that was the first time I'm sure you felt like, wow. I remember your wife was telling me like, can we just offer more money or full price, or this is completely normal logic. But here it doesn't work that way. It's very strange to explain until you experience that.
That's right. Yeah, I think we, seeing something in a fantastic location, price almost too good to be true, and us saying, hey, for that price we could make renovations and turn it into a wonderful spot. Right from the start, I think you both sensed that something didn't quite feel right. And again, it gets into a bunch of discussion, negotiation, some bureaucracy, some sellers who were maybe not necessarily being the most open. And I think being able to advise us to move on because we were just kind of wasting time in negotiation with them, I think was a great bit of advice, and allow us to really go on to
But it was hard to move on, no?
It is when you see something that you're like, perfect location, amazing price, and good structure, definitely. So you need someone to give you that shove and just say, what, it's not going to happen. Let's go see something else.
Yeah, but I'm sure it was difficult to understand that during that moment, right? And if it were me, I couldn't imagine like, why should I move on? She didn't say no.
Right.
She just like yes, no. I think that was the first time you guys really felt like, oh, it's really different. And then we have, I can't remember, I think the second one was the one in Douro Valley. You guys really came close to a few options.
Yeah. So that one, again, great house, cliffside, overlooking the river, pool.
Basketball court, I remember.
Yeah, a number of different things. It was great, like for a family. We were just like, wow, this is a fantastic location. And, price, I think, fit the bill. And again, I think the importance of having you along and your team along, like, it was a team, lawyers, financing, all that stuff, really was helpful for us, because when we got to the stage of negotiation on that property, and then we got to the CPCV stage where, you're drafting up the promissory note and you're evaluating it, that's where we had noticed that what was in the promissory note and what was registered for the property was missing a lot of key renovations that they had made. So they had added, additions to the house, the pool, a lot of components that were just not registered, and really would get us in not a great situation with the municipality if now we own a property with a number of different pieces of it that are essentially not legal.
Yeah.
So again, good advice, the ability to make sure that we were able to go through everything and catch some of those things, because the sellers were not upfront about those components. And so again, we were able to move on and away from that situation. But these are the types of things. If you're looking for value, if you're looking for in a hot market, you're trying to find things that are going to be unusual and different. But with that, you need help, you need good negotiation, and you need good advice.
That house was definitely beautiful. I remember the long driveway, drive down to the house, and it has everything a family would want, right? You can see yourself, we can see ourselves enjoying in that house in summer. The issue with that house, just to brief you guys a little bit, was the seller side was withholding information. So we actually asked them the questions like everything's registered. I remember the part that was not registered, which was very crucial, was part of the living space. It was a whole floor not registered, right?
That's right.
So annex swimming pool, I totally understand because it's quite common for in Portugal that is not registered, but we recommend you go through City Hall anyway. But this living space that affects the selling price.
Yeah. It was a whole other building.
Yeah, so the Douro Valley one was super, I would say, they were not being honest about the living space. This entire building was not registered. That was illegal. So for us, it was really, this is too far. And then we asked the listing agent, then we want a discount. Remember, we had the conversation, at least we can get some discount. He was like, no. So basically we had to withdraw because it was, at the end of the day, it was not a good deal anymore.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've tried to come to terms with is the difference in experience from buying property in Canada. Generally one of the biggest things that we start to see is there is no centralized listing. So a lot of times if you're dealing with agents, you're essentially just dealing with those properties that the agent has view to. So, you're getting a very limited view of what's on the market, and different agencies will list their own properties. So, being able to work with someone who can go across agencies, I think is critical. And of course, the other big component of difference was, we're used to, there's an offer, and when you place that offer, it's registered. It's registered for when you put it in. It's for registered for what you put it for. And, here you begin negotiations. Things kind of go into this cloudy, murky world of discussion, and
Totally.
Yeah, and it's just for us, it's a bit of a strange transition. Feels more bureaucratic. You have to have a bit more patience than we're used to, and it's not always exactly about just agent to agent. Here's the money. Close the deal. There are sometimes other variables involved in those types of discussions and negotiations. So it's different.
It's like usually when our clients make an offer and then they will get excited waiting for the feedback, right? And sometimes they don't hear anything for days, for weeks.
Weeks.
And we actually had one apartment for you guys in Alcântara, remember? We visited, you guys made an offer. While we were talking to this agent, turns out he was talking to other people and he was comparing offers. And then we sort of sensed it. We're like, no, we're not playing this game. If you accept it now, or we withdraw. And he was still trying to postpone because I'm imagining he probably was waiting for another side's feedback, compare the two offers. So that passed our deadline and we withdraw your offer. Of course, you guys agreed with that, but that was also not a perfect practice in the Portuguese real estate market. Of course, not everyone works this way. The majority of agents are very professional, but indeed it has the limitation of the visibility of all the listings. Sometimes you just don't know what's available. And many houses, Rafael and I found, are not even listed. Because we know that especially in small places, even in Algarve, we sometimes will get a call, hey, we have a new listing in this area. Would you guys like to see it?
Yeah.
It sometimes works like that. For me, coming from a big city, which the real estate market is super developed, I also wow, we're doing things in the old school way. Yeah. This is very, it's a different world here. And as you said, once you make an offer, it really enters in this blurry, unclear.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on the other side.
So we're used to a world where there could be multiple offers, but again, those offers come in and they evaluate them against each other, make a decision. I think here part of what we're not used to is feels like they're buying time as they try and evaluate other offers coming in. And so you get many wonderful excuses like, you'll get a CPCV come in that's blank or they're missing some info and then they have to go back and send something else again and then it buys another week. And so as again, patience, having someone be able to vet through that with you, was critical because you're just seeing all these little things happening that are making this process just take longer than you feel it needs to than we're used to.
Especially when you guys are not here.
Yeah,
right?
Doing it remotely can be quite difficult.
Yeah.
It was a journey, and that wasn't all. I think we also had another experience where you guys advised us rightfully that a couple ways to go about financing. You're either paying cash or you can go the mortgage route. And I think in North America we're very used to going the mortgage route. Yeah. You get pre-approval from the bank for a certain amount of money, and then you can go ahead and make your offers. But here, if you choose to go the mortgage route for investment or you want to be able to potentially buy another property down the road, you need to be ready for the fact that, again, the bank will evaluate and approve each property you're putting an offer on.
Exactly.
That's going to add to the time. It's also going to make you less of a ideal candidate to the seller. Mm-hmm. So again, that's something that we experienced. And the other issue, especially in a hot market, is as the market is going up, often the value on the market is going to be higher than the appraisal. So, that's another thing we experienced is that, the bank was willing to appraise a property at X and provide us a mortgage for that amount. Yeah. But, the market was already well surpassing that. So we had to make a decision on, are we going to go with a property that's kind of out of touch with the market cost. So your advice of, if you can, go with cash. if you're going to go the mortgage route, be prepared.
Yes, because when the bank appraise one property, it has nothing to do with if you guys like the location or not, right? So I imagine, but I know location is a defining factor. So I imagine for sure a house in Alentejo has different value in Lisbon in the market price also. Mm-hmm. But when the bank does it, it's more like what is the size of the property? Yep. Everything needs to be registered. They only evaluate the registered part. For example, we had a client 2 months ago. They were buying a house with a pool. Mm-hmm. It's way over $500,000 mark, but the pool was not registered. So the bank went there, only evaluate the house itself, just ignore the pool because it's not on paper.
Yeah, and I guess the experience we had is when you have a property that's been completely redone. Yeah. In the middle of a number of properties that are still more traditional, we think the bank was evaluating relative to other properties that have sold in that area and not taking kind of everything into account for a property that had been completely, finished and modernized. So again, that's a risky take if you're going to go the financing route, and as we found out, you need to be able to deal with it. So
I remember the day your wife called me like, Mia, I think we found it. You can stop searching. We're going to see the house tomorrow. We already get in touch with the owner. And then the next day you said, it's better than I thought. The renovation was really well done. And I saw the video you guys took and I said, I totally agreed. Yeah. I think I mentioned the price was a bit high, but not much. Mm-hmm. I think more or less it was fair. Yeah. And then we said, but it highly depends on the appraisal. Yeah. Because we knew you guys want to take out mortgage. And then this house was indeed appraised much lower than the asking price. This is a perfect example of, I do believe the house has way more value than the appraisal price. Mm-hmm. But this is a very subtle thing that you can really put your finger on it, but you just have a hunch. Well, we usually have a hunch, but we saw the video of the house. It's really beautiful. It's well done. And according to you guys, it's also a good location. Mm-hmm. But it's in Alentejo. Yes. I think that is the issue of that house. Not issue, but that's the issue of the appraisal came a bit lower.
Yes, small town with primarily undeveloped houses, and this was kind of just the one house standing out in the middle of this kind of small village. So Yeah, I think, we on the flip side, we talked about all these experiences, but on the flip side, we also had the good experience of being able to purchase this and have it appraised higher than we bought it for, which is great. And finally, that excitement we felt as we were finding different houses, you can imagine that went up to a different level when, we finally found a place that great home base, able to purchase and know that, we were getting what we thought was a really good deal in the middle of a fantastic neighborhood.
In this case, you guys got really lucky actually, because many of our clients take mortgages. Sometimes it happens when the appraisal comes out higher than the selling price, but it doesn't happen that often. But this must be a nice surprise for you guys when the appraisal price came out. So after all these stories all over Portugal, and now we're sitting at your home in Lisbon.
Yes.
How did you end up in Lisbon?
It's a great question given the journey we went on. I think the thing about Lisbon is we're always here at least twice in our journey, right? When we arrive and when we depart. And, I've got family in Lisbon as well. And so, Lisbon, I think, was always a consideration set. But for us, when we were thinking house, we were thinking maybe even a bit of a North American, spin on it. House, let's get a pool and get more space. And so I think we evaluated those options and we tried those out. And, that's certainly always something that's still out there. But I think from our perspective, we have a base we will always be able to go to, easy to the airport. It's, very vibrant city. So, I think having experimented and looked at, some of those other things across the country, Lisbon will always be an excellent, base for Portugal, kind of where it's situated right in the middle, accessible and vibrant. And we know as an investment, this is basically going to be, knock on wood, pretty steadfast.
Yeah.
We've already had some, great demand and ability to be able to rent when we're not staying in the apartment, property management, all of those things that, be able to just have it furnished as well while we were not here, and just be able to get the apartment running. So, Lisbon was always going to be the sensible choice. And, we think it's a amazing choice. And I think it's almost like we went on this journey to experiment and then knew we could come back to be sensible and, just get something that's going to allow us to still go and stay in Airbnbs with a pool for, a few days or weeks and be able to come back here as a base.
That's interesting because when Rafa and I have calls, especially with couples, the property is going to be used by them no matter, once a while or full time. After the call, we always say, and sometimes we tell the clients, like, we see you guys as Lisbon people. We see you guys as Algarve people because we can, as we know them more and more, we kind of have the intuition of which area would suit them. Yeah. And earlier when I just came in and I saw you and your wife, I was like, you guys are really settled here. Because this is the first time I'm here after you guys moved in. Yeah. I was like, this really looks like a home. So I'm very happy to see you guys really enjoy the home and the neighborhood, and even your kids love this apartment instead of a villa with pool in the Silver Coast. I think this works out the best.
Agreed. And I think, for us, we live downtown Toronto. We're used to, a vibrant city life. And so for us, the transition was very easy. I think if anything, we were looking to, have kind of that summer home that was very different from that, but having something that you can transition to very easily and then be able to just kind of go off and do your thing, it suits us really well. So
that's exactly what you did this summer holiday, right?
That's right. That's right.
You guys just travel back from Alentejo and Porto and all the different areas.
Yes.
So this apartment is in Lisbon. You guys do not live here. You only come like once or twice a year, whenever it's possible, right?
That's right.
And many people say nowadays, they think when they buy investment property in Lisbon, there's no AL license, a short-term rental license anymore. So they just give up. But I think seeing from you guys are doing midterm, you guys are doing long term. By the way, if anyone's interested in renting this apartment, please reach out to us. It's a great apartment, it's in great location. But contact us for more information. So how does it feel as an investor without the possibility of short term? How do you feel so far for midterm and long term rental?
Yeah, I think that's something we were worried about. Part of why we were looking outside of Lisbon was that we weren't as restricted about short term. But we found the medium term market to be very attractive. We haven't had any issue really finding tenants. And additionally, the medium term market allows us the flexibility to be able to say, hey, we do want to come for Christmas and we'll, block that time off. Yeah. But, we have found it really easy to get into, a lot of demand. And I would recommend it, I think, for anyone who's thinking about investing, not to worry about the issue between, not being able to do short term if you're in a city like Lisbon. And, I would suggest if you're going to do it soon. The market it's still very hot, it seems. Like the city is super vibrant. And absolutely, I would say, just despite what we talked about and the trials and tribulations we went through, it's part of us really trying to zero in on what we thought was wonderful for us. And it's a fun journey, and it doesn't have to be that painful. It doesn't have to be that long. I would recommend it for sure for someone to get into to Portugal. There's so many good things about the country, about the market that people are finding out about, and partly why it's in such demand.
Yeah, so any advice that you would like to share for people who want to invest in Portugal but don't know where to start, especially for people that live outside of Europe that is not familiar with this, code of conduct or the culture?
Yeah, I would say, well, number one is get the right people to help you out, because it has been, it's a different world, it's different rules, regulations. So, get the right people. Don't worry about being remote. I think we had come into this thinking that, we needed to really traverse the country and see the different options. And we did, but ultimately, the location we bought, we did completely remote. And so, for us, it was eye-opening that, you can get a good feel of a neighborhood, you can get a good feel of an apartment, you can close it, you can furnish it, you can, take care of it and be able to list it all completely remotely. So don't let that be a hindrance. I would also advise folks to do it now. It's a market that is only going to get more difficult to buy into. And also, there are, as we saw, there are so many options. So, depending on what it is you'd like, if, you can really find what you want in Portugal, even if your tastes change as they did for us. And even if you're whether it be house in the country or in the city or pool or no pool, definitely it's there. So get the right people. Don't worry about, being remote, and you'll find, what you want here.
Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing your experience on our YouTube channel especially, and thank you for inviting us to your home. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. We tend to share more stories with our clients and their first-hand experience with purchasing property in Portugal more on our channel. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell below. See you next time. Bye.